Hi. So hey, let's talk about the time capsule assignment. I have posted there below the link that you clicked to see this. There is a PDF of photographs that are sort of, highlights for the time capsule project. Now, if you think back to the goals of this assignment, the idea behind the prompt is that right now you are living through kind of very tumultuous times. I think that's a safe word to use. There is a lot of political tension. There is a lot of very real effects of climate change. There is a global pandemic. So it's tough times going on right now. And so the goal of this assignment was looking back at Robert Frank, August Sander, the Farm Security Administration, and a few others as photographs that were sort of documenting specific times in history. And so that's kind of the challenge of this assignment. So now, the photographs that you see here, well, frankly, they don't all do that, right? And I understand, and if I have one big sort of concern regarding this prompt, it's simply that I was a little surprised at how a lot of the photographs that came in didn't directly address the prompt. Okay, they're just seemingly pictures that sort of more fall in with the previous assignment, the Order Out of Chaos assignment, and don't get at the prompt at all. That said, I would say, like, yeah, okay, we, as long as you're making photographs, you're learning from making photographs, and that's strong. So when I chose photographs to put in here, I didn't limit it to the ones that I thought, really worked toward the prompt. There are pictures in here from everyone who submitted for the assignment, and some of them directly deal with the prompt in a really, strong way, and then some of them don't, but I think are still, pictures of interest. And that's fine. One of the hardest things as a student is to take your own interests and find the sweet spot where you can align it with whatever the powers that be, i.e. me, are trying to get you to do, okay? And my point in the prompts is simply to try to sort of direct the way you are using the language, the language of photography, helping you find strategies and ways for making work that is strong and clear, while also just improving, the technical parts of things. So what we have here, boom, that's it. What perfect timing. There was one full loop of the, I want to say 45, 46 pictures that I have included here, in the range of, 4 to 5 pictures from each person who submitted for the assignment. So let's kind of, I'm not going to talk about every picture, but let's just kind of talk about, I don't know, strengths, weaknesses, common problems, etc. Let me go back. I mean, I think this picture right here, oops, doesn't directly address the prompt, although you could argue that this sort of fits in with the idea of development and growth that we see in, say, the half empty, half full prompt, or the New Topographics, Robert Adams, when we're looking at that work. I do think that there's this lovely, I think it's a lovely photograph that shows us not only the sort of dividing line between development and not, but also has this great sort of balance of nature and not. Like the natural world here is lush and beautiful and special, yet at the same time, we've got this sort of, line of boxes in the background. I also think there's really interesting vantage point going on here where we have this, you know, weird line. Like it's not straight, right? Like it's this meandering line that follows and hits this radio tower, but then it also kind of carries on in this road back here in the background. Now, there were a bunch of pictures from this assignment from a bunch of students that follow. Let's see. I'm going to grab some. Boom. Can't see those all that well, so I can't tell if those are applicable. Boom, boom. These are all examples of pictures where I think it does a good job addressing the prompt, digging in toward that prompt, and sort of getting at some of the tumult of the day. But as you look at these, question whether the work of the argument is being made through the thing or the photograph of the thing, right? Like, what is the point of the photograph? Is the photograph adding anything to the conversation? Okay, because it's a challenge to make photographs that that carry the conversation further than the object itself. Now, so I mean, for example, like here you've got the Trump cup, but it's not clear, like, I don't really know what's up with the background, like what that is, a teapot. Does it need to be in the photo? Is that just, you know, convenient? I don't know. One way that you can, two ways that you can take an object and add a layer of, you know, in a sense, commentary to that, is through using a strategy like we see here or we see here, which is kind of like creating like more of a studio-ish version of that, where the object itself becomes isolated from the backdrop. It's not just as it exists in the world. And so it's almost like psychologically that backdrop becomes a sort of space for reflection. Now this obviously actually wasn't one object. This is 5 objects. Now what's interesting in this, you all know what they are. I question whether in 50 years anyone will know what they are. You know, but it's, I mean, it's a nice, clever, creative response to the prompt. Here we have the sort of, you know, messaging on the signs, but is there something else that we can do to, you know, draw attention to the messaging or create something out of that messaging rather than, you know, a sign in the middle of the rectangle? Here is a great example of taking the thing, but doing something with it. These two are great examples of basically like competing messaging, right? Like finding this street with the homes and the flags and this street with the homes and the flags, and the way that they are like countering one another. It especially makes sense given just the sort of ping pong of the times right now, right? Where it's just like this constant sort of argument, politically anyway. So keep asking yourselves if there's a way to, you know, tweak that photograph to, like, I mean, in this one, for example, like, there's delicious ingredients here. The flag, the sports cars, the mayor sign that's been thrown in the trash. I think that's interesting, you know, but I'm not positive about the way that the picture is made, because we have this in the center. Do we need the Peace Health sign, the Columbia Tech Center? Is it like, keep asking yourself if there's another way to make that photograph that really draws attention to what you want us to see, rather than, being a thing in the middle. Like here's another good way where here we've got these two different screens sort of creating a conversation against one another, or we have a story about inflation being high down on the laptop down here, but up here on this computer we have the Standard & Poor 500 index. Basically the stock market's rising and so is inflation, right? So the rich are getting richer on that one. Let's see. I think that this is, I don't know. I'm trying to think, you know, how well does it fit with the prompt? I don't know the answer to that, but it's kind of a lovely photo. The one thing I'd maybe push for in this is just because I saw in the contact sheets that there are some that are pulled back a little more, and I felt like the signs or the text for the movie titles was actually really interesting because it was this sort of marker of both today and the past, you know, the sort of nostalgia for the past. Don't know that has anything to do with the prompt right here, but I do think that this is a kind of an interesting photograph, sort of shot in a, like, in that almost Robert Frankish style where we have that sense of drama and spontaneity because of the way that the photograph was made and the ambulance speeding down the street, obviously. Here we go. Like, I mean, I think toward the prompt, this is a good example of the sort of, you know, wasteland of the, what, just like every little vacant scrap of land is sort of used in ways. This one, not I don't know that it's applicable toward the prompt so much. Maybe you could argue, I suppose, that it's the sort of retail, commercial, social landscape of today. But I do think it's a really lovely photo that is a good example of using multiple spaces, a good example of creating an active rectangle where we have multiple things sort of moving across the rectangle. Nothing's wasted. You know, well seen photograph. Here are some that where these are, there's some clever stuff going on with the placement of the objects in there and very intentionally sort of using symbols and metaphor. I think this is a really lovely photograph toward that idea of, you know, again, the sort of Robert Adams new topographics, half empty, half full sort of approach. Yeah, I know, right? Masks are our new litter that we notice all over the place. There are a few years there where it was those little plastic single joint tubes that I noticed everywhere on the ground. Now it's masks. You know, I don't know how applicable it is to the prompt yet. I do think that this is just kind of, you know, a well-seen photograph, noticing the reds and the relationship going on here. This, in the same way, no one is going to really, I don't know. I want to say no one's going to notice. Maybe they will. I think it's really well seen. This red to red to red to red to red. You know, keep that up. Love it. I also like when, you know, one of the things I keep sort of talking about and thinking about is this idea of the volume knob on a photograph. And this is a good example of a picture that is really quiet, but well seen. And just the juxtaposition between these two houses, I think, says a lot about, you know, this neighborhood, this world. And I mentioned these already. The one thing actually that I had mentioned to just improve upon, like, you know, ways to make things better, is that both of these have the same slightly cockeyed lean to them. And so as you are shooting, just start paying attention to your lines and making sure that your lines are straight. Also, they're both framed really tight, which normally like, I'm good with that, like that shows me that you're really thinking about the rectangle. But at the same time, you may want to give yourself a little more wiggle room around the outer edge. So if things are shot cockeyed like this, you still have enough space that you can sort of rotate the picture to straighten it up in the cropping part of things. By the way, I do that all the time. Most of the photographs I shoot naturally are just a wee bit cockeyed. Nice juxtaposition going on between old and new here. This was a interesting example of sort of shooting quick and on the fly, and the frame's a little weird in that like the RV's cut off over here going out. The color's really weird. I go back and forth. I can't. I think the color is interesting, but we also, there's that question of like, well, what is it trying to do? What's it trying to say? What's the point, right, of making the color weird like that? Sort of steers us off into, I mean, my joke is that the colors steer off into biohazard territory, really bright, super saturated colors, sort of Gatorade-y. I don't know. I'm on the fence about the color shift. I'm not convinced that it helps. And I'm not convinced that it helps make a specific point, but I don't know. I'm open. This is where I wish we were in a room just so we could have the conversations, Yep, nice. Another nice mask fall kind of thing. One of the very few photographs with people in it. Not many people photographs, but also, yeah, this is a marker of now, Again, from the sort of studio play. Nothing really to do with the assignment, but I do think that there's this interesting juxtaposition between the trees, the smoke, etc. I think this is a nice little, cultural landscape, so to speak, that does get at the now. Same here. Humdinger of a picture, right? That really great juxtaposition of the fall leaves and that, power plant in the background. Again, nice constructed play. No one in your life is going to say, man, I love that picture of that green house with the stack of wood. But I think this is a really lovely photograph that does kind of work well for the prompt. Feels like now, especially the private property sign taped up here, the windows broken out and covered up in plywood. We have these markers of fire. We have this marker of a shed that's no longer there. These are markers of change. So I think that there's, it's quiet. The volume knob's turned down, but I think in a really effective and subtle way. More masks. Maybe I should have lumped all the mask pictures together. Not necessarily, toward the prompt, but I think really lovely juxtapositions going on here with the shadows and the reality. This is one, though, where I don't even know that we need this wall. I'd be almost tempted to crop in tighter and get rid of the part of the picture that makes sense of it, like the wall, the sidewalk, that little hint of it. You could just have the whole picture based in the reflection and it would still be magical. Might be better even. Yeah. Wasteland. More masks. I didn't even intentionally notice or count all the discarded masks that are out there in the world, but you're seeing them. One of the other few pictures of people, but a great example of just this nice little moment that's caught on the playground. These kids just being kids. I kind of love how this coat down here at the bottom reads like a crumpled child in the ground. Kind of a funny, well seen. Well seen and well captured. Same thing here. I think that this is a good example of, and going back to the question of ethics, I think that this way of photographing the sort of houseless problems in the area is very effective and also still doesn't fall into the sort of traps of exploitation by just staying back and sort of photographing it as a landscape. like, you know, many of these are doing. Nothing toward the prompt here, but really lovely photograph with the warm against the cool, repetition, variation, multiple spaces, all at work. So, I mean, good stuff. And now, in terms of the stuff to work on, I mean, we talked about the different approaches and ways of dealing with that. The only other thing I'd talk about in terms of the technical stuff is the single most common technical problem with the camera that I keep seeing is overexposure. Boom, that's it. Like, and so you need to look at the histogram as you are shooting to make sure you're getting proper exposure. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch the screencast about using levels, because that's the one where I explain histograms and how they work and what they are telling you. Because pictures like this one's a little high. It's maybe okay. That one, these are, you know, all three of those are just kind of on the cusp of being a little on the overexposed side. Looks like I can't see any here that I included that are, you know, fully overexposed. But that's definitely the most common problem that I see. And what I'm looking for when I look through your contact sheets is, I get it if the first one or two or three are overexposed. But then what I should see is I should be able to see that you've looked at the histogram and the exposure comes down. The picture doesn't need to look good on your camera. You're just trying to capture as much information as possible with the camera. So you're going to then take the picture in Photoshop and edit it, right? And so the deal with overexposure is that you can't fix what isn't there in the first place. If you are overexposing, you're blowing out detail, and you're having skies, more often than not, that go pure white, and you can't fix that. I mean, you can fake it, you can do Photoshop stuff to add a sky from a different picture in, for example, but you don't want to get into that. Like, it's better to just do it right in the first place and then edit. The other technical things to work on are simply make sure you're following the steps for adjusting your pictures in the correct sequence, meaning if you are dealing with saturation first and then color balance, you're working against yourself, right? Color balance establishes the overall color balance of the image, you know, but the saturation then establishes the intensity of the color balance, you know, I should say of the individual colors. And so if you do saturation first and then change the color balance, you're whacking out what you just did. You know, you're working against your own adjustments. So take those steps slowly, and also swing them too far so you can see when something goes wrong. It's hard to deal with color if we're not in the room together. It's hard to deal with color when everyone is, you know, on their own different computers and monitors, etc., etc. You know, this is an example. This one, like, looks pretty good. Saturation's up a little high, right? Like, it veers a little into the sort of gumball machine, Gatorade, biohazard territory in terms of the intensity of the color. But the overall color balance is nice. I would just bring that saturation down a little bit, get us a little closer to reality. And, you know, look through that PDF. Look at your own pictures compared to other people's to get a sense of, are you too light? Are you too dark? You know, again, hard to do in a sort of group setting like this. Anyway, good stuff. Keep them coming. Let me know if any questions. Let me know if anything here doesn't make sense, or always if the feedback I've given in terms of the grading, if you've got questions about that, I'm happy to talk it through. I'm happy to have a one-on-one and sit there and go through your assignment with you and talk things through. We're getting toward the end, so don't hold back on that stuff. Okay, well then go get them. Bye.